Agent Daphne Honeybutt, sir.
Number?
382235.
Barbara Windsor is best remembered as the cheeky, charismatic star of the Carry On films and the unforgettable Peggy Mitchell on EastEnders, a role that made her a national icon. With her signature laugh, larger-than-life personality, and deep-rooted place in British popular culture, she embodied a particular era of entertainment that celebrated sass, sparkle, and scandal. Since her passing in 2020, the world has paid tribute to her public achievements and larger-than-life screen presence. But behind the glamour and gossip columns was a decades-long secret that remained hidden until now. A chance meeting that changed everything.
The way these cream cakes flaunt themselves, it's enough to lead a girl astray. Given half a chance.
Fresh cream cakes. Naughty.
But nice.
In 1979, Barbara Windsor was already a household name when she crossed paths with Bob Dunn at a hotel in Devon. Bob, a nightclub owner with showbiz connections, wasn't immediately enchanted by the famously flirtatious star. In fact, he passed out on a sofa that night after too many drinks, while Barbara watched with amusement. Undeterred, she asked two colleagues to carry him up to her room, a move as bold as anything her on-screen alter egos would dare. That impulsive act sparked the beginning of an unconventional romance that lasted over 20 years, yet almost entirely in the shadows. Barbara, then married to notorious East End gangster Ronnie Knight, found in Bob someone she could trust and confide in. Their affair quickly grew from flings and flirts to something more serious. To make their relationship seem legitimate in public, Barbara made Bob her manager. It was a clever arrangement that allowed them to travel together and be seen in public without raising eyebrows. What began as a holiday romance turned into a real emotional connection. The thrill of their secret affair was always tempered by the looming shadow of Ronnie Knight. At the time, Ronnie Knight had already served time in prison and was considered dangerous by reputation alone. Bob later confessed to fearing what might happen if Ronnie ever found out. That fear intensified when Barbara got pregnant with Bob's child. She was 42 years old, still married to Ronnie, and performing in Calamity Jane in Nottingham when she quietly had the pregnancy terminated. In time, she admitted to Bob that she regretted the decision. Barbara's relationship with Bob took on a deeper emotional dimension following that event. He became not just a lover, but a trusted companion. When Ronnie was later accused of murder, Barbara leaned even more on Bob, asking him to protect her and even putting up his home as bail for Ronnie. The affair was no longer a fling, it was a double life. Bob had not just entered Barbara's heart, he had entered the treacherous world of her real-life drama. Love, loyalty, and gangsters. Barbara's marriage to Ronnie Knight was as colorful and volatile as her on-screen career. But what the public didn't know was that while she and Ronnie maintained the facade of a committed couple, both were engaging in extramarital affairs. In Barbara's case, her relationship with Bob Dunn was more than just a passing indulgence. It became her true emotional outlet, even as she continued her marriage to Knight, who surprisingly didn't seem to mind once he found out. Bob and Ronnie, rather than becoming enemies, found common ground. Knight's own affairs may have dulled any sense of betrayal, and he even encouraged Bob to travel with Barbara on her professional engagements. It was an incident that rattled Bob, especially considering Ronnie's parting words to him before the trip, "Look after her." Despite the dramatic moments, their three-way dynamic was oddly functional. Barbara seemed to thrive on the tension and sense of romantic autonomy it gave her. She gave both Ronnie and Bob matching gold medallions, perhaps as a symbol of how central both men had become in her life. Barbara wasn't looking to leave her husband for Bob, nor did Bob seem inclined to force the issue. Instead, they operated within this curious arrangement, one that functioned without confrontation or confession. Everything changed when Ronnie fled to Spain in 1984 under suspicion of participating in the infamous Security Express heist. Barbara, away with Bob when the news broke, was crushed. For all her romantic wanderings, Ronnie was still her constant, her anchor. She could not believe he would abandon her, especially to live with a girlfriend in a villa funded by money she had earned from her naughty but nice advertising campaigns. The departure of Ronnie left Barbara emotionally shattered. Her relationship with Bob began to cool, not because of a fight or falling out, but because she needed space to recover from another man's departure. Their dynamic had always been driven by the need to keep secrets and manage chaos. Without Ronnie, the structure collapsed. As Bob recalled, quote, "There wasn't a big parting day. She just got engrossed with problems and wanted space." A new marriage and an erased past. After Barbara's marriage to Ronnie dissolved, she swiftly married Stephen Hollings, a restaurateur nearly 2 decades her junior. She later admitted that the marriage was rebound-driven and it didn't last. Bob also moved on and married someone else, but their connection never truly faded. They stayed in contact sporadically, and whenever they did speak, it was as if no time had passed. When Barbara became seriously ill in 1998, Bob sent her yellow roses, her favorite, and even though her new partner, Scott Mitchell, allegedly removed Bob's note, she knew exactly who they were from. That small gesture reignited their contact. Barbara called Bob at the pub he ran, often enough that his staff began referring to her as a regular caller. She even showed up at the pub in a white limousine one Sunday, and from that moment, they quietly resumed their relationship. By then, Bob was divorced, and Barbara wasn't married yet. They traveled together, including a memorable trip to the Bahamas, where Barbara used a cheeky waterfall photo for her Christmas card with the caption, "Merry Christmas from Viagra Falls." Barbara had suggested marriage again, but Bob hesitated. Things began to shift when Scott Mitchell returned from a trip to California. Bob noticed champagne bottles in Barbara's house. Gifts from a previous visit to a vineyard had been turned so the labels with their photo together no longer faced out. He saw it as a quiet sign that his time in Barbara's life was coming to a close again. The final blow came when she invited him to a function but made it clear he would have to sit at a separate table because Scott would be attending. Bob walked away, accepting that while Barbara still cared deeply for him, she was now choosing a different kind of life. She went on to marry Scott, and Bob was written out of her public story. Shut out in the end.
What was it like when a specialist turned around and said to you, "It's Alzheimer's"?
That was the moment when she just looked at me and she held her hand down and she said, "I'm so sorry." And whispered it to me.
She said sorry to you?
Sorry, she said sorry. I just held her hand and I said, "It's okay, we're going to be okay."
As Barbara's health declined, her relationship with Bob effectively vanished. She had once made him promise never to put her in a nursing home or perform humiliating caretaking tasks if her health failed. But in the end, he wasn't even allowed to say goodbye. He wasn't invited to her funeral. His name never surfaced in the public tributes. It was as though the years they spent together had been erased entirely, edited out of the official narrative by her final partner, Scott Mitchell. Bob doesn't hide the hurt. He admits that at one time, Barbara had expected him to be by her side until the end. They had promised each other they'd always be friends, no matter how their relationship evolved. But when her condition worsened due to Alzheimer's, that door seemed to close for good. And while Scott was praised for his tireless devotion to Barbara in her final years, Bob quietly mourned not just her passing, but the strange disappearance of his place in her story. Now, 5 years after Barbara Windsor's death, Bob Dunn has finally decided to speak. Not to tarnish her name, but to fill in the blanks that had been left empty. His story is messy, emotional, and full of contradictions, just like Barbara herself. It paints a more complete portrait of the woman behind the laugh, the glamour, and the Queen Vic bar. Now it's time to hear from you. Do you think Barbara Windsor's private life should have remained private, or was Bob Dunn right to finally tell his side of the story? Let us know in the comments section below.